Hello, you beautiful little bastards. Today, I thought I would give you something special. And we would have episode 2 of Behind the Madness with Fear itself. Now, I thought that we would only do one more of these solo, and then the next one I would bring in our main character, David, and possibly Alice, if I can arrange such a thing. Schedules are not exactly easy to correlate for things like this, so you must understand that we have constraints to certain things. But all in time, you will get what you deserve. So, Chapter 2 is called Remember. And let us begin. David thought back 6 years ago to that fateful night. We hear Alice. Papa? David mutters a response, and then Alice goes on to say, Papa, I had a nightmare. Could I sleep with you and Mother? David replies, Of course, darling. What was the nightmare? And Alice says, There was a rabbit with a waistcoat and a man with a large hat. Then there was a cat with sharp teeth, and they said bad things to me. David asks what kind of things, and she says that if she tells him, they will hurt him. This, obviously, concerns David. He now is more awake at the hearing that somebody has threatened his daughter and his family. And he wonders now if maybe somebody is in their home, if possibly somebody has broken in. So, he sits up and he grabs Alice. He brings her in and tells her that nothing is going to hurt them. The next day, Alice seems very distant from everybody. Throughout the day, he hears what he thinks is Alice talking to herself. And this would have seemed normal, it says, if not for the fact that it sounded like she was talking to somebody else. And so he passes his daughter's room and overhears her saying that she's talking to somebody called the Hatter. He knocks on her door, and she tells him to come in. He steps in, and he sees a small table with 5 cups of piping hot tea sitting on it. 4 chairs are set up around the table. So there are 5 cups and 4 chairs. He thinks this is cute. He thinks she might be having a tea party with herself and some imaginary friends, perhaps. She beckons for him to join them. And so he does. But when he's about to pick out a chair, he goes to the 5th one. And she tells him, No, that's the Hatter's seat. Now, he's confused at this name. He says, The who? And she says, The Hatter! He's my friend. He doesn't like when people sit in his seat. He is very off-put by this. She's very serious. She's adamant that he not sit in this seat. So he takes another seat that she directs him to. And then that's when it hits him. How did she get piping hot tea? She tells him, The Hatter did, Papa. And he's a little bit annoyed at this. This time he doesn't pay any attention to what she's saying about the Hatter. He asks, "Alice, dear, did Mother give you the tea?" She responds, "Silly Papa! I told you! It was the Hatter! Mother has been in the garden all day." This is very worrying. He's not a genius, he says, but he's pretty sure that scalding hot pots of tea don't appear out of nowhere, and Alice cannot reach the burner, much less use it. David hears Alice whisper something, or at least he thinks that it was Alice. He says, no, of course it's Alice. Who else could it be? "You're silly, Hatter. Daddy is good. Right, Daddy?" He's confused. He says, "What?" And she says, "You are good." He says, "Of course, sweetie." He's still mulling over what's happening. He's finally defeated on the matter, and he leaves her room, swearing that he can hear a voice behind him say, "Hurry back!" But he figures this is his daughter doing some kind of little voice, dismissing it and saying, "Okay, Alice." And again, she giggles. She laughs even harder this time. She says, "Toddy, you're funny. That was the Hatter." He doesn't turn around, and he goes to his study, where another thought creeps into his head. Could she be telling the truth? Was it even remotely possible? No, of course not. It's simply her imagination, he says. 2 hours later, he looks out the large window in his study, and he nearly falls back in his chair. He sees in the dead center of a... He sees there in the dead center of the garden, right by the large oak tree, a white rabbit in a waistcoat. This is obviously scary to David, because this is exactly what his daughter was talking about the other night. And while he hasn't put that together in his brain just yet, he's about to, and that's what's going to send him over the edge. He rubs his eyes, figuring that he must have seen something incorrectly. And when he does, he doesn't see a rabbit, but instead Dinah, Alice's cat, standing on the top branch. So he smiles, having dismissed his delusion. And then the cat slowly begins to smile back. He can see each and every one of the cat's now giant, razor-sharp, pearl-white teeth beaming back at him. He rubs his eyes again, but now he's not in his study anymore. He can't see anything but the deep black that surrounds him. And in the distance, he hears the sound of a ticking clock. He counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times he counts, and then the clock strikes. And then it begins to slow, and dread consumes him. Something's not right. Where is he? What can he do? And where's that clock? Then he sees 2 eyes of amber emerge from the void, followed by a smile of those same pearl-white fangs from earlier. And then it begins to bob and dance in the air, hopping around like a wisp of smoke. And then it stops right in front of David. And it talks, and its voice, it's cold, it's dark, and it seems to come from every side of David. It says, "Soon you will know it all. You'll hear the voice and answer the call. The call to end it all. And you'll watch it fall, 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 fall. All of it must fall." And that's when the ticking finally gets louder and louder, and then another figure appears. Only David can barely see this one. It says that the dancing shadow that had spoken to him had glowing features, but this new one was barely visible by the faint red glow of his eyes. And from what David could make out, he saw that the figure was tall and lanky, his features much like a rag doll. His face was not illuminated, but as David looked up, he could see a very large, dirty-looking top hat. But it wasn't normal. It was at least as tall as David's arm. And just as David's eyes met with the figure's, a raspy voice erupted from the dark. It says that while this one shared similarities to the previous one, it was far more sinister, more scratchy, more disturbed. In fact, it says to David, it sounded like the voice of a complete and total madman. A Mad Hatter. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Tick-tock, tock and tick. The clock strikes once, twice, and thrice does the bell sound off, and then you're late. Late, 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 late. It says that the entire space around them begins to tremble and shake, and David feels many hands grabbing at him, though he can see none, as the feeling that he's falling through thin air begins to consume him. It says he fell, and he heard the sinister voice call down after him. "Soon, soon, sooner than noon, then you will see, and then you'll be free, free from the chains of humanity, into a land so fun and grand, with people who are never ever sad, because rather, down here, we are all mad." The figure laughs. It says like a clown put on laughing gas while smoking. It was just that, it says, a twisted clown. But no, David says, clowns are bright. And it was then that David connected what his daughter had said the night before, when she disrupted his slumber and told of a hatter, one who spoke awfully, and of a cat with razors for teeth. Things made so much more sense, and yet they at the same moment were perhaps more confusing as ever than they had been. Late. Late. Late for what, he says. And then we cut to his wife shouting, "Late!" who has only now decided to make her presence known. David says, "What?" Still piecing the puzzle of where he had been together in his mind. But when formed, it says it does nothing much to David's expectations. Such things were simply mad to think of. Mad, like the Hatter. It says he had been mad, but not angry, just off his head. He hears a voice. He says, "Who's there?" And David turns his head to see his wife. Of course, he thought. She was the one that woke me up. Or carried me up, perhaps? Yes, indeed. I was falling. It's only me, dear. I was just saying that the new gardener is late again this morning. I swear, he's off his head. A mess. A simpleton. Honest to God, I don't know why I hired the damn fool. Well, first thing tomorrow, he'll be off. Off to ruin somebody else's schedule. My roses have a very tight and precise watering cycle. Thanks to that fool, his negligence might have cost me the most precious of all my flowers in the garden. It says his wife was very mad over the late arrival of their gardener, but he didn't care. It said all it cost him was the annoying rant that his wife kept going on about. It says David could not care about the flowers at the moment. It says the only thing he cared about was figuring out what on earth had happened to him for the past 20 minutes of time. So David has been in this limbo-like state for 20 minutes of time. And while we don't know what that looks like for anybody that's not in this new world, in this void between worlds, you might call it, that will surely be explored later. And I assure you that upon such that revelation, you're going to shit yourself. So, it says as he sits there, he's desperately attempting to form a reasonable explanation to put to the entire ordeal, and he finds that his memories of the episode are becoming fewer. He can't remember any of it now except for the tall figure with the hat. It says, what did he mean by the call to end it all? For that same matter, what on earth was he going on about? It says to David, as he would later put into his own words, they are the mad ramblings of a deranged lunatic. But we'll get to that eventually. And that is where we end Chapter 2. Chapter 3 is called Time for Tea. Yes, I did a little bit of a rhyming there. Chapter 3's Time for Tea. So, when we return, we will explore Chapter 3 and a little bit more into our villain. Or should I say, anti-hero? The Hatter. I'll give you one piece of advice while we explore this vast story that I've created, this world, I might say, that I've created. Expect the unexpected, and never think you've figured anything out. Because chances are, you're more wrong than you can possibly imagine. Sweet dreams, kiddies.